Hello and welcome to QWERTY. Yes. We are so excited that you are all here at the incredible New York Historical Society where the past and the future come head to head. Woo! I'm KK Apple. I'm a writer and a performer and a fourth-year mentor in the Digital Media Mentoring Program.
And I'm Javi Pham, an extreme music enthusiast and it's going to be my second year at Girls Right Now in the Digital Media Mentoring Program. KK and I are honored to be here tonight to share our stories and to be your MCs for this evening's program. Just a quick note before we get started, this is the Digital Media Mentoring Program. So we want to encourage you to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using the hashtag QWERTY2018. For those of you who don't know, Girls Right Now is New York's first and only writing mentoring organizations for girls, matching writers like KK and me as mentor and mentee pairs. Tonight marks Girls Right Now's 20th anniversary as a nationally award-winning nonprofit, and QWERTY is a big part of our celebration. Before we get started with our program tonight, we want to invite Mia Nagawiki, VP for Education at the New York Historical Society, who's going to tell us more about where we are sitting tonight.
Hello. Good evening. Welcome. My name is Mia Nagawicki. I'm the Vice President for Education here at the New York Historical Society, and I am delighted to welcome you all here, to have you in the midst of our wonderful collections. New York Historical Society is the oldest museum in New York. We're the second oldest museum in the country, but we're delighted to have been partnering with Girls Right Now for the past couple of years for a lot of reasons. One, our missions align beautifully, and two, history is nothing without the written word. Of course, history is the stuff that surrounds us, like the gorgeous paintings on the walls here, but technically, history is the study of the written record of the past. And so history gets told about and by people who had access to writing and to literacy. So I think it's just so amazing and powerful that Girls Right Now works to empower young women, and particularly young women of color, to find their voice and to write it down so that future historians, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years from now, can tell a more accurate and inclusive version of New York City's history in 2018. And hopefully, historians 200, 300, 400 years from now will look like all the folks in this room. Will be every shade, every gender, and will tell those stories powerfully and meaningfully. So, in short, history is important, therefore writing is important, therefore history is important, and we're delighted to be a part of equipping the next generation of writers, scholars, and history makers here. To that end, I want to just note for all of you that this coming September, we're opening a brand new digital learning space here in the museum on our 4th floor. It'll be called the Tech Commons at New York Historical, and it will be free for teenagers from across the city to come and take advantage of the most cutting-edge digital tools, from high-processing computers, professional-grade software, 3D printers, virtual reality, whatever the cool stuff is. We're going to have it. And so we invite all of you young folks to come and join us on drop-in hours and in our various programs that will help you think about history, think about literacy, and think about technology together, because that's how the world works. All of those things happen all at the same time. So mark your calendars for September 2018 and then forever and ever. And I hope you'll come visit us at the Tech Commons. But lastly, I just want to congratulate all of you for the initiative that it took to be a part of this program, for the hard work that you did to get you here this evening. We hope you continue on your way and come back and visit us again soon. So thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the evening.
Hey, Javi, I have a burning question. What is QWERTY? Is it an acronym? Is it a row on your keyboard?
Is it a community of young women who have been working tirelessly throughout this entire year to come together into one night of explosive art, expression, and identity?
Yeah, I think it's that one. I think it's that one. So tonight is a digital media exhibition that showcases innovative genre and medium-bending work by the participants of the Digital Media Mentoring Program.
Tonight, you will see the work of mentee-mentor pairs in the form of powerful writing, videos, and animations, original games, hard-hitting podcasts, and much, much more. We used a range of new applications and platforms like Audacity, SketchUp, Twine, and Scratch.
These projects, created over the course of many hours, many journal pages and Google Docs, and countless pair meetings at your local coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, we know where all of them are, will push you to understand the changing world of storytelling.
You're in for a treat because you'll have the chance to browse the projects on the table in the back, talk with the mentees, and hear about their work, their inspiration, their process, and more.
And leading up to the exhibition itself, we have here tonight a panel discussion with some of today's game-changing women in the media arts. Before we invite up our speakers, we just wanted to take a moment to express our heartfelt thanks to the people who make Girls Right Now possible. The passionate staff, the deeply committed board of directors, the hundreds of volunteers who dedicate their time and talents to our mission, including the mentors who pass on their craft and their love. Let's do a little round of applause. We would also like to thank the central partner of our digital media mentoring program, Parsons, the New School's Department of Design and Technology. Girls Right Now is grateful to the countless individual and institutional partners and supporters. There are too many to name here tonight, but we're going to name some. Special shout out to New York Historical Society for hosting this series, to our 20th anniversary host committee and sponsors, to our lead sponsors M. Monroe, News Corp, Amazon Literary Partnership, and Little A.
All right, so now it's the moment that you've been waiting for. In tonight's discussion, our panelists will be exploring their own personal journeys through the digital space, as well as working within different mediums to find their voice. The panel discussion will be framed by this year's theme, Generation F: fierce, funny, flawed, fearless, frustrated. Girls Right Now mentees are part of a generation yet to be defined, a generation facing unprecedented challenges, freedoms, technologies, and choices. And I look forward to hearing what our panelists have to say about it. To begin, we are thrilled to introduce you tonight's moderator, Vivian Lee. Vivian Lee is an editor at Little A, Amazon Publishing's literary fiction and narrative nonfiction imprint. Her list includes books by Matthew Saltis, Viet Din, who is a PEN Faulkner finalist, and Namia Koster, who is a Girls Right Now mentor alum and just spoke at and emceed Girls Right Now's chapters readings. Vivian's writing is basically everywhere, widely published, and we are excited to have her here today.
Thanks, everyone. I'm super, super thrilled to be moderating this panel today with all these inspiring women. Girls Right Now is so important. I was also super excited to have been invited 2 weeks ago to the chapters reading and hearing all of these wonderful, wonderful women reading their short stories and their poems and their screenplays, and it's so inspiring to see how creative and fearless these women are. And you know, it is like very much this Generation F, this year's theme, and kind of the topic of this panel. So before I get started, I'm gonna invite all the panelists to come up. So why don't we just go down the line and kind of just give a brief intro, and then we can kind of get started? That sounds good.
Sorry, me?
Sure.
Hi. Oh my God, there's so many people here.
Yeah,
This is so exciting. Hi, you guys. My name is Jasmine Hughes. I am an editor at the New York Times Sunday Magazine. I work on this new special project section called NYT Mag Labs, where we make like New York Times for kids and like a special fitness section that will be in your papers this weekend. Please go out and buy it so I can keep my job. And I'm also a writer for the Sunday magazine as well.
Take this mic. Hi, my name's Sudie Green, and I'm a writing supervisor for Saturday Night Live, which means that I write sketches for that show.
I'm Lynette Nylander. I'm a writer, editor. I was previously the deputy editor of Teen Vogue and ID. I'm also take my skills in writing, I suppose, and apply it to brands for creative consultancy and editorial. So, as well as being a writer and editor, I'm also vice president of content at a fashion brand called Alexander Wang. That's it.
Vice president.
Oh, don't.
I am Kimberly Drew, and I do a lot of different things, but my day job is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is just across the park at 82nd and 5th Avenue. And at that job, I am the social media manager, which means like all the tweets and the Instagrams and the Facebooks. I manage all of that stuff. And then outside of that, I do some writing in a couple of different publications.
I feel like this entire panel, we just have like multi-hyphenate job titles, which is really amazing. And that kind of brings me to my first question. Thinking about the QWERTY exhibition and the multimedia anthology and the Generation F book, we'll review, it will kind of showcase like what mentees define Generation F. So for you, how would you all define today's generation of women and media makers? It's a big question.
I'm going to take this mic, and I'm going to speak first, which is, I don't know what defines this generation, but I can say what my impression is, and I think my impression is a group of women that are not satisfied with the status quo, that although we can look at ourselves and look at our generation and say, oh, we've come so far maybe from previous generations, that there are still so many battles to be fought. We can see that now with the Me Too movement happening, and that battle is being fought by women in media, by women in Hollywood, and across all different jobs and places. And I think that, to me, I feel like we are proud but not satisfied. And I think that's really cool.
I would say as someone like, I hope a generation removed. I'm only 26. I don't want to be old yet. That I think when I was a teenager, I felt a lot of the same things that teens are dealing with in such beautiful ways right now. But I didn't have as much like information and nuance around these topics, and two, even though I felt these things so deeply, I had neither a venue nor like the self-confidence to express these things. And now it seems like it is not only cool to be woke, it's cool to be like conscious about the world that's going on around you and care about things outside of yourself, but it's almost unacceptable to not take that stance from the jump. And so I feel very inspired and so happy to see that like by default people have to care about the world they live in order to like go to lunch with their friends or hang out on the internet or really to just survive.
I guess I would say that our generation is really, really discerning. I kind of always say in my everyday life that youth or kind of young people in general, you really can't fool them right now because they have the access to information and they're really aware of how and what has happened before them. So there's a level of transparency that they expect and is expected of them. So I would say, yeah, we expect a lot because we know a lot and we know how things can happen, we know what should happen, and we have the kind of the benefit of knowing what hasn't worked in the past. And I think media has become has become a really great galvanizing tool for us all to be communicating. If you see injustices or if you see things that don't work with your general core beliefs or ethics, you now have a forum to be able to discuss that. But in the same way, if you see things that are great and are amazing and you just want to share a fantastic meme, or, you know, I really enjoy Cardi B videos where she talks into the camera. That honestly really feeds my soul. And I like to share them with my friends. Like, that's great as well. So it kind of works in both ways.
I think I agree with what everyone has said. It's hard going last. But one thing that I think really defines this generation and kind of the space between women of kind of our age and young women like you guys is that we're in a moment where there's less loneliness. And I think that that's supercharged. Like, when I was a teenager, I felt so deeply alone, and kind of to Jasmine's point, I just didn't think that there were other people like me. And whether that be through my trauma or through the things that I enjoyed, I just felt super alone. And now we're in a moment where there's less loneliness. And I think that that also steps into the professional realm, where I think about rooms that I'm in, because I work in the art world, which is very, very, very white and male. And I take the responsibility of understanding that I'm only as lonely in these rooms as I want to be. And so I really have made a commitment to try to bring more voices into the spaces that I'm in. And I think that's something that really is has been going on for some time, but we are very like gung-ho about it and burning shit down, which is exciting.
It kind of makes me think of, I feel like we all work in kind of worlds where it's very much dominated by straight white men. And so how do you deal with that as women and women of color, and, you know, with being on, like, using online as a platform, or even using your own platform to kind of deal with that, or put pressure on something, or try to make change?
I think it's important to not back down. So, for example, when I started my job at the Times, I felt dumb, you know? I felt childish. I was like, I didn't like Cardi B yet because I wasn't up on these things, so I'm not a teen. But I was like, I like the Kardashians, and I like Rosé, and I like all these things that I think that, like, the men who surround me, we were talking about, like, acid rock in New Jersey, like, weren't also discussing, and I felt as if I had to flatten myself in order to, not even to match what they were interested in, to just sort of, like, tamp down my interest because they, you know, they weren't the same. But when you're in spaces like that, it's incredibly lonely and alienating that no one else is like you, but it also works to your advantage in some small way, very small particular way, that no one else is like you because you are bringing something else to the table. This isn't to say, I mean, every single person has blind spots, right? But your blind spots in these situations are probably very, very different from the blind spots of the people around you. And so that you're doing a lot of the work, which, again, can be lonely and alienating and frustrating. But it also is a way that you can really express yourself.
I can definitely relate to it feeling like you're the only one kind of doing that. I mean, I know a lot about straight white men because I work at SNL. And, you know, no offense, straight white men. I love straight white men. My dad's a straight white man. You know, I've dated them before. They're great. Can be. I would say, you know, there's such an interesting experience that I first encountered when I first started at SNL, which is that I'm a woman and I find things that are funny in my everyday life. Something as simple as, you know, sitting around all day on a Sunday in my leggings, which many men don't know is a thing that women do. I mean, how many people here, like, live in our leggings? We live in our leggings. We wear them to school, we wear them to work, everything like that. So I wrote a sketch that was about kind of a, like, legging that was used for working out, designed for working out, but it was really used for women setting up shop on that couch. And
that's with A.D. Bryant, right?
Yes,
I love
wrote that with A.D. Bryant, and we wrote it and we were super proud of it. And what happens at SNL is, you know, all the sketches are read aloud in a room of almost everybody that works there, not just cast, not just writers, but producers, directors, people that work in the crew, set designers. And we wrote this sketch that was really an observation on women's lives. And the only people laughing in the room were women. And how many women were in that room? Well, I would say that was about a quarter. compared to something that was about, you know, maybe a man's life or an observation on something that men could relate to, then you're working with 3/4 of that room. And it was so frustrating because we knew that the piece was good. What was rewarding about it is, I think, when you're in a space where you feel like maybe you're the only person with your voice, or you feel like people have alienating voices to you, it is so much easier to build something, to create something, than tear something else down. To give somebody an option of do this thing instead of that thing. Yes, sometimes you're going to have to shut stuff down. I mean, I shut stuff down a lot. But, you know, and I kind of just said, look, guys, there's like 10 women in that room, but they were all laughing. And a lot of women watch SNL. And the female cast is so funny in this, and we love our female cast, and I think that we should do this. And they did it, and guess what? Half of that audience, half of that live audience in 30 Rock is women, and everybody was laughing. So I would say, off of that long, rambly story, build something, create something. I think that's, give somebody an option to say yes to that and no to that.
I think to that point, I guess it's like about knowing your inherent worth, which is exactly what you did in that situation, was be able to, you were really succinctly be able to say to those people in that room, look, I'm valuable in this space because my unique selling point is that I'm a woman and I know what other women like. And I think that's definitely what I've tried to do in my career, with varying degrees of success, if I'm being really honest. Like, but it's to know what I'm good at, know what I have to bring to the table, and really own that, and don't let people question or shape that, because they will. And that can be women too. I want, of course, the question was kind of more geared towards, you know, how do I navigate being in more of like a white male-dominated space? But that is something that you will get from, in any kind of professional environments, people trying to shape your core belief. And a lot of the time, that's the only armor that you have. Like, that is the thing that makes you different from, that makes me different from Kim, that makes me different from anyone else on this panel. And it's a lot, and can give you a lot of strength in really questionable, or in professional situations that might question you. So I would say definitely, know what you have to bring to the table and really own it. There are so many times I think about, oh, I should have said that. Or I had that idea and I just didn't have what am I trying to say? I wasn't brave enough to just say it. I think that's something that women particularly feel. And then it goes down, I think it goes in tiers if you're in minority spaces and there's not as many people, because you don't feel like maybe you will be backed up in that way. So if you have something and you truly believe in your core that it's good, say it, or do it, or whatever it is. Most of the time I found that even if it isn't exactly right, someone will just say, no, that's not quite right. And they usually give you feedback on why it isn't. And that's good.
I'll just add, so in my industry, it's weird because there's a lot of white people. A lot of them are women, but there are not a lot of women in power. So it's really strange that top down, it's like the white dudes, and then there's just like a ton of white women, and then there's like a couple of people of color kind of intermixed in like the junior level, but we're coming. And for me, in my job, because I'm a very visible person within my institution because I manage the social media, so if I mess up, everyone knows. And for me, I think, one, that I see that as a position where I can be a little bit more rowdy. Like, I've just taken rowdy as the course because I could have taken scared. But I am a person who is not afraid to start a fight. I'm a person who, and very gently. And I think that a lot of that comes from having a good community of people. So one thing I will point out, especially as you guys are entering into professional spaces or into college-like spaces, it's really important to have either an infrastructure of people who are within your professional setting or people who are in your phone. Like, my group chat stays very active because I need to flesh out ideas, because if I'm going to email someone about pronouns or about why certain groups of people should be invited to more diverse sets of exhibitions, I kind of have to run it by a few people first. And that's just a writing process, right? Like, you guys don't just use like the first thing and that's it. Like, you consult with editors. And for me, I think I have a lot of people who are kind of like emotional editors for me. And that's how I get through the day-to-day of being in an otherwise kind of like very, it's a difficult work environment. And so I try to just lend and ask for the things that I need.
Yeah, to Kimberly's point, I think the best thing that I did for myself when I did start my job is that I immediately found a buddy who was another woman of color, because not only is that person now one of my closest friends, but white people are crazy. And sometimes you're in your office and a white person does something crazy and you're like, I need to talk to somebody about this. And that person is there because they understand you, and they can also, unfortunately, sometimes they may be the only person in your office space that can validate your experience, because all the crazy white people are like, I don't know, that doesn't seem crazy to me. But the person, your buddy, will always be like, they are the ones who will go to the bathroom with you when you're upset, or go to the coffee shop, or just understand where you are, how you're feeling, and why you're feeling that way.
Yeah, I think a sense of community is just so important. Like, make your own space. Force the space if you don't have it. That's how I've also been coping. I kind of want to talk about, Kimberly, you were mentioning, we're talking to a lot of young women right now who are entering these spaces. How did you all kind of end up in the spaces that you are in now? And then I'll start with you first, so you're not last.
One thing that I kind of have arrived at as a mantra is never be your first no. I think a lot of times young women of color, it's very easy for us to say, I can't do that. I don't think I'm smart enough, tall enough, pretty enough, whatever. And that for me was like my recipe for success. I started a blog called Black Contemporary Art in 2011 when I was in college, because I wanted to see a blog that existed like that. I wanted to go onto the internet and be able to see what Black artists were up to, and when I couldn't find it, I made it on my own. I didn't have visions of grandeur for what it would be, but I knew that it was something that felt really important to me, and so I started building it. I could have very easily been like, I don't know enough, and so I can't do this. But I just kind of put my head down and worked on it, and have been working on it for the last 7 years. And through that work, I was able to leverage a career. Because that's the fun thing about passion projects. It's especially as the media landscape is expanding, when you really, really, really love something, hopefully there will be an opportunity for you to make it as sustainable as possible, whether that's sustainable by way of making you happy if you have a regular day job that doesn't make you super happy. But for me, I found that making my own space was really vital, and I was lucky enough that a lot of other people needed that space too.
Oh gosh, I'm a weird one. Obviously, you can tell by my accent, I'm from London, and you're allowed to do weird things in London, like intern when you're 14. So I was interning when I was 14. I always say, I think any kind of success I've ever had is actually just because I was lucky enough to know what I wanted to do at a young age. I knew I didn't have enough actual knowledge to know exactly how the world works, but I knew that I liked fashion. I knew I liked words. I knew I liked reading, English lit, communications, and talking to people. So through your age, you get to know what that looks like. And so I interned for years and years and years. And then someone gave me an internship. I have to abbreviate the story because it's extremely, extremely long. But someone gave me an internship, and I worked really, really hard. After 3 months, that person called me into her office, and I'll never forget this. She asked me a question. She said, what do you want to do with your life? And I didn't understand the question. I was 20 years old. And I said, I just didn't gauge why she was asking me that. And she said, because you're the best intern I've ever had. I want to do something for you. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, I want to give you a job. And I was still in college at the time. So I said, well, I don't understand. I've got a year left. I don't want to leave college. Like, what are you saying? And she said, well, how many days do you go to college? And I said, 2.5. Because you go in for a couple of hours and then you don't. And she said, okay, well, the days that you aren't in here, you aren't at college, you should come and work with me. I want to teach you. And that led to my very first job in magazines and I was an editorial coordinator because she put me in the right places. So to that end, it was working really, really hard at something without the promise of anything, which I do think is a virtue that is becoming a teeny bit lost, even though I do think young people work incredibly hard. It's just to say, I really say push forward of that narrative of like, show people who you are when they don't owe you anything, because then they really do remember it, and they really do, they'll come back and pay you back that. So it was that, and I would say a bit of timing and a bit of luck. And then I do think talent, hopefully. But I always think it's really funny about me because I didn't study journalism or English lit. I actually studied fashion design and marketing. So my approach to writing, I was always really nervous because I didn't learn in the traditional sense. And I still, to this day, whenever I write features, it's always in my own voice. It's always just what I think about something. It's never subbed perfectly or any of that sort of thing. But push through all of that. I think again, any success I've ever had with writing or places I've written or editorships I've held has been because I take a different approach. So yeah, that's an abbreviated version.
How I got to my job, I got hired at SNL when I was very young. I was only 24, and I was very, very recently out of college, and I was very lucky that I got that opportunity very young, and I was very lucky that in a way I was ready for it. I wasn't completely ready for it. There was a lot of learning to do on the job. I'm still learning all the time, and I often wonder how I survived that situation. And I think that everybody in this room is obsessed with something. Everybody in this room has something that they're the #1 fan of. Maybe it's yourself, maybe it's your writing, maybe it's music, maybe it's even just one person, one famous person, one person that you know. I was obsessed with SNL. And I didn't want to be a fan anymore. I wanted to do comedy. And so I turned that obsession of that medium and that show into an obsession for my life. And from when I went to college, I was doing comedy wherever I could. I was lucky I went to NYU. They had a really cool sketch group. I was writing sketches really early, not necessarily even thinking, oh, I'm going to work at SNL one day. I wasn't like dumb enough to be like, my dream job and that is actually what I'm going to do. It ended up working out like that. But I was obsessed, and I only, and this is not to say don't broaden your horizons, because I did have professor parents that made me take history classes, and I'm glad that they did. But I was doing sketch comedy everywhere I could. I did sketch comedy at UCB. I did it at different weird shows. I did solo characters. And then what happens when you obsess over something, obsess over your writing, obsess over your creation, is because you become known for that thing. So then I started to become known for this thing that I did. It wasn't the only thing that I did, but it was the thing that I put the most work into. And then that obsession caused me to become prepared for when this lucky, crazy opportunity happened. I've seen a lot of people get chances really young. And that can be a tricky thing because everybody thinks that they're ready and you don't know if you're ready or not. But I would say always act like that opportunity is around the corner and that you need to be ready for it. And the way you'll be ready for that, like you said, is by working really, really hard without even knowing that something's around the corner.
Yeah. Sort of the opposite of how Lynette came up. I've always had this very dutiful sense to writing. Like sometimes you'll talk to writers and they're like, I always knew that I meant to put pen to the page. I just didn't know how to do anything else. And so I just did a series of things in my life because I was like, that's what people do. So I didn't study journalism at my college. We didn't have it, but I was the editor-in-chief of my college newspaper because I was like, that's what people do. And then I moved to New York and I got a job because I was like, that's what people do. And my first job here was at New York Magazine. I was a fact checker, and it was a job that gave me a lot of free time. And so then I started freelancing on the side. Again, that's what people do, but in not in any way. I wasn't really working towards something. It was just, it like seemed like it would be fun. And then I sort of just threw a bunch of ideas out there, and then people like read them and then published them. And then I started getting all these Twitter followers, and I was like, oh, heck yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And similar to what Sudi was saying, I never like aspired to work at the New York Times. When the Times called me, they called me and they asked me to apply, and then I had to go through a very, very lengthy, scary application process. I was working on a blog called The Hairpin. I was not making a ton of money, but I had just written a Shouts and Murmurs for The New Yorker, and I was like, yes, this is it. I've reached the apex of my career. I'm crazy happy. I have money. And in the Times, someone emails me and asked me to apply to this job, and they said in the email, like, I keep seeing your name everywhere, so I figured I would ask you if you were interested in this. And at that point, I had the job at the blog, but I was just like freelancing like a crazy person because I just wasn't saying no to anything. I haven't gotten enough distance from that to know if that's a good thing or it's a bad thing, but I was working a lot and I was working really hard. And I think the thing that has behooved me most in my career is that I'm everywhere, or I was for a very long time, and you never know who's looking out for you, right? It's one thing, like, there are a lot of people who, like, just read the Times, and The Hairpin was part of the site called The All, and there are a lot of people in New York who, like, just read The All, and there are a lot of people who just read Harper's Magazine, or New Republic or something, and, you know, people have their blinders, they have their interests, whatever. You have to go to all of those things. So as much as your interests overlap with any generality, I think you should just go for wherever you can be taken.
So I'm going to ask some questions that Girls Right Now mentees have prepared for you. So Sarah Kearns Sr., did you hear?
What's up, Sarah?
Who is a second-year mentee. She asks, how do you balance the pressure to create work that will garner page views and attention with the responsibility to publish deeply reported, nuanced stories?
I think people want deeply reported, nuanced stories now. Like it's like cool to be smart. It's always been cool to be smart, but you know now it's much more at the surface of things. I think honestly that when publications, web, print, historic, new, whatever, have these sort of like surface level, superficial stories, ideas, people get really upset. And it doesn't necessarily have to be superficial, it can just be inaccurate, right? Sort of like what I was talking about. There are things that are like not conscious of. Kimberly was talking about like pronouns, for example, and if like a publication publishes something and misgenders a person or uses the incorrect pronoun, they're gonna get a lot of blowback from that. And it's not, and so I think when it comes to page views, people want to read about the sort of world that they want, and if you are representing that world, then I think that people will come.
I think a good kind of example of this is when I worked at Teen Vogue, which I'm sure many of you in this room probably read and are familiar with, but I think it's about the balance. At Teen Vogue, it was a perfect example of nuanced, really, really well-written opinion pieces, think pieces, stances, manifestos on what was really galvanizing a youth community globally, with stuff about hair and makeup, and Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber's ever tumultuous relationship. It didn't need to be so separated. I think that's doing young people such a disservice to say, what, just because you're interested in fashion and music and leisurely pursuits, that you won't have any want to know about the world around you, to know about sexual health, reproductive rights, what's going on with our president. It's about a balance, and it's about assuming that your reader is smarter than you think they are. That is the shift we've seen in media so much, is that before, media was your church and state, and people was I believe across the board, whatever kind of publication you were interested in, that publication always assumed that they were teaching you something. It's not like that anymore. Now it's an exchange. You kind of have to assume, I definitely assume when I'm a writer, that this person probably knows more about it than I do, because that's the reason why they're reading it, or that's the reason why they've picked up, or whatever. So I think it's about a balance. It's about talking to people on a really human, elevated, but human level. And it's just about really, really good content, I think. I've always hated saying good content though, because what does that mean? But is it something that's provocative? Is it something that makes you think about it after? Is it something that made you smile or laugh? I don't know what. I think I'm still figuring that out. I know when I enjoyed an article. I know when I think something was garbage. That's what I think about it.
I don't. I've had a weird mix with this stuff. So I think my bit of advice, and I don't write a ton yet. But one thing that I found to be really important is to be in contact with your editor and figure out why those decisions are being made and how things are being positioned. Because I have two examples. One, I was tasked to write about my hair, and the editor that I was working with was like, write about your hair in Trump's America. And I had to reply and say, I've had this hair for longer than he's been in office. He's actually been in office for just a few months, and it hasn't changed my relationship with my hair at all. But the Trump angle would get more views or clicks or whatever, but I was like, what are you trying to get at? And then through conversation, I realized, okay, they were really interested in talking about the political implications. There were all these recent court trials that came up. We were able to pair really amazing journalism with a very cool story, and the rest of it came out really nicely. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I had a moment where I was a little bit more radicalized than my editor, in that I was writing this piece about black sitcoms, and it was like a super fluffy fashion piece. And as I was doing my research, I came across a court case where a woman who was on a popular sitcom sued the man who was on, the male lead on a sitcom because he was sexually harassing her. And I felt like it was unjust in this moment, in any moment, truly, to not bring up this issue, especially because some of the other people who I had talked to called themselves a part of the Me Too movement. And my editor was really apprehensive about sending it that way. And then, of course, it's like, how do you then properly catalog things and keyword things? Because you don't want it to seem clickbaity, but it was just matter of fact that this thing had happened. And so trying to write through the fact of the matter in a sensitive way that didn't feel clickbaity happened through a lot of conversations. Like, we were talking every day for a week before the piece came out, and it was literally just like a simple fashion piece. But I think it's a matter of integrity, really, because even the stuff that is super clickbaity can be amazing, stunning journalism. And to your point, it's like you can get you a girl who can do both. Like, it's a real thing.
Okay, and I'm going to go to the second question. Annalie Tevris, a senior, also a second-year mentee. She asks, when you decided to be a writer, did you anticipate the kind of work you're doing now?
No. No. Like, as I said, I didn't choose to be one, so there's that. And no, but that's the amazing thing about having the ability to write. It's like the most transferable skill, and because not many people, number one, it's so undervalued, and don't let people undervalue it, because it's really special. But it's undervalued. It's you can use it across all disciplines. It's just language. It's communication. You can do so much with it. So yeah, no, I didn't imagine that I would be doing kind of more strategic and editorial thinking and brand voice and tone for a major fashion brand with writing. No, I didn't, but it's cool that I can. I just like to see where I could transfer it next, really, like almost like as an experiment. Like, I'd like to see if I could write. I've always wanted to write, no, this is true. On makeup, you know how you can come up with names, like it's called Berry Blast or whatever, if it's like I'm interested to know if that's a job. No,
It's totally a job.
Is it really? Sold just that? Yeah. Okay, we'll see. Now I've identified my next career path, which is makeup unit namer, and I bet I could do that because I know how to write. So it's a win-win.
as I said before, I didn't think that I would ever have this job, but if you had asked me what I wanted to do, I am one of probably the 1% of people that got the job that they wanted. But I had no idea how hard it would be. I think a lot of people think that comedy is easy, and comedy is stupid, but it's not easy. It's very hard to come up with a variety of fart and burp jokes every day. You know, you can only make the Melania is trapped joke in so many different iterations. Yeah. And then you're asked to do it again because, you know, where's she been? She's been gone for like 3 weeks. We don't know where she is. I did not anticipate what I would be called upon to do. And I think that SNL definitely thought that we were going to be in the age of Trump and we would be writing that story, and that definitely has been the dominant story, but the other dominant story has been the Me Too movement. And that is a very difficult thing to make funny because it's not funny. But what I've been called upon to do with the other women and, you know, supportive and allies at the show, but the other women at the show have been called upon to do is to make sure that that is represented on the show. Not just because it's a very difficult subject and we don't try and make light of it. We just try and bring a spotlight onto it, which is like a difficult nuance. But also what I found is that there is comedy in everything, even the most brutal of subjects, because there's always somebody who's getting it wrong. And what you have to do is, you know, bring the women that are being brave and exalt them, and then just tear the people that are getting it wrong to the ground. Just tear them to the ground. So, yeah, I did not know what I would be asked to do. And I think that many of you won't anticipate the challenges that you are asked to meet, and I think that you will all find that you are able to meet them, and you won't know until you're asked. But that's what's really cool about being a girl.
Yeah, let's clap.
I'll only add, I similarly didn't expect to be doing any of the jobs that I do. My job didn't exist 10 years ago at the Met. There are some people who are still shocked that I have my job. I've had it for 3 years. I'm not the Met's first social media manager. And the work outside of that, I would have never thought that I would be a writer, or that anyone would task me with writing. I didn't think I was a good writer. I didn't think it was within the things that I could do. But the way that I got over that hump was, one, realizing that writing is not something that you become good at because you want to. It's because you do it. Like, it's literally just practice. And, like, no one told me that. I didn't know. And then suddenly I was like, oh, right. Okay. Or literally, and right. And so that has been exciting. And I'd encourage any of you guys who are trying to figure out what it is that you will be doing to just, like, give yourself a break. Because I legit, when I was sitting where you guys were sitting, I had no idea what I wanted to do or how I would do. And then now I'm on the other side of it and just kind of, it's a fun ride.
I thought that I would grow up and write for a magazine because that's what people did, and so then I grew up and wrote for a magazine. But I just thought it'd be, you know, like some random magazine. I never really aspired again towards the Times because I never thought there was a space for me there. And so even when I had the job offer in hand, I still took, I don't know, like 4 days to think about it because I had to seriously consider, like, will I really fit in here? Will I be happy? Are there people like me? Are there people who are going to understand me? And it's, you know, and obviously the end of the story is that I took the job and I'm very happy there. But that is something that is worth asking yourself even when you're confronted with your biggest dream. Is it your dream under your terms, you know? And you have to make sure it's not your dream if it's somebody else's rules. So make sure you know what you want and you advocate for that.
I love that.
I just made it up.
Just put on a t-shirt. I know we're out of time, so I just want to thank you all for being on this panel. I think oh yeah, please. Yeah, it's been wonderful to hear, like, affirmations of community and making space and also finding your voice and knowing that it might take a while to find that voice. So it's like nice to hear from all of you too. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Vivian, for moderating, and thank you, Lynette, Jasmine, Sudi, and Kimberly for being such awesome panelists. We can clap again. We really appreciate your expertise, your insight, your Cardi B references, your sage advice. These are the conversations that we're excited to be on the cutting edge of as Girls Right Now mentors and mentees.
This is Girls Right Now's 20th anniversary, and before we acknowledge the class of 2018, we'd like to invite up to the stage an incredible alum pair from the Digital Media Mentoring Program to show how this program truly changes the trajectory of our lives and careers. Please welcome Mel Stagner and Bernie Benjamin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for having us back. It's really great to be back. As alumni, I think we thought we'd start off by just saying like a sentence or two about what we're up to now. So do you want to start?
Hi, guys. My name is Bernadette Benjamin, but you guys can call me Bernie, like Bernie Sanders, if that works for you. I just finished my second year of college. I am up at Bard College. It's a private institution for a year. I also finished my second year of Japanese. I'm really excited because in 3 weeks, I'm going to the country. So, arigatou gozaimasu. And yeah.
So I left the world of writing as a full-time writer. I'm still doing it part-time and on my own, but I'm back in school. I'm getting my master's in social work, hoping to work with young women when I graduate. So that'll be a great transition from Girls Right Now to here. So I guess when I first started with Girls Right Now, my first year as a mentor, I went into this big audience and I sat down and I was sitting next to this young woman who was very furiously scribbling into a notebook, and I thought she was so dedicated and committed to her work, and I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I had a mentee like that? And then they were matching us all together, and they said, okay, Mel and Bernie, and then we both stood up, and we were sitting next to each other, and I was like, this is my mentee, this is so great. So I just got a great first impression of her. I found out that while she was so quietly and furiously scribbling in her notebook, she was not quiet at all, which is a great thing because there was something I admired about her from the start. And then, when she first came home from college in the fall of 2017, I felt like I got to know her all over again because she had changed so much as a person and as a writer and as a young woman. Like, for example, we met up at Starbucks, and I was like, what, you like coffee now? Like, I did not know that about you before.
So touching on the story that Mel talked about, I was writing in my journal mostly because I was kind of scared. Joining Girls Right Now was, I guess, the first step for me, and me being a writer or me acknowledging that I write or anything to do with writing. I never once told my mom that I was a writer. I didn't tell my friends that I was a writer. But I used to write a lot, but I just thought it was just me writing down nonsense. And so being in the program for the first time, it was like my way of taking a step, but I was very nervous. But when I was sitting next to Mel, who at the time I didn't know was Mel, I felt like this very calming aura about her. It was, I specifically wanted to sit next to her for some weird reason, and it felt really nice to do so. And I was writing in my notebook, but I was looking over to her and I heard the conversation she was having, and I looked at her and she was like, wow, she's so beautiful. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? I was like, and I looked around the room, but then I looked at her again and I was like, oh, this is what writers look like. And I was like, I don't look like this at all. And then, going back in the moment when we both stood up when our names were called, I felt a sense of relief. I was like, oh, yay. And I was really happy. And I think that was a really nice moment because we hugged too before we got up to take the picture. And I think that was really nice. And when I came back after the fall of my first year at the first semester at my college, I went through something very traumatic, and during that time, Mel was the first person that I called because I knew that if I talked to her, she would help me with the situation. It was very, very traumatic for me. I didn't know what to do. And I wanted that first meeting for me to explain to her, one, to apologize, because I didn't know what she was doing during that time, and I didn't want it bother her. But I wanted to first explain to her what that situation was. And then after we did that, we sort of had a nice conversation about what we were doing from that whole fall semester. And it was really nice because I haven't seen her for a while, and I was like, you are one of the most important person in my life. I even had her come to my graduation for high school, and my mom loves her, and I was like, you're a very integral part of my life, and I needed to be with her again before the year turned over to 2018. So yeah, that was our first experience.
I'm not gonna cry. So Bernie, mine and Bernie's work together started off, Bernie had this really ambitious idea to work on a sci-fi and fantasy novel, and we started working on that chapter by chapter as the year went on and as our mentor-mentee relationship bloomed. And an excerpt of it even won a medal from the Scholastic Arts and Writing program, which we were both really excited about. And I think when we ended, it was like chapter 9 or 10, so we got really far in this really ambitious piece of work. And as we were going, I noticed that Bernie's voice had really shifted in clarity and tone, and just took on this more mature and more assertive depth, and it was really inspiring to see. We also ended up working on a podcast together through the digital media mentoring program, which is so cool because it was a medium that neither of us had ever worked in before. And yeah, it was just really cool to navigate that together.
Yeah, definitely. I want to touch upon the podcast because I think during the DMP, as you guys know, that we do a different variety of platforms in terms of our writing, and it was really cool. So I brought up Prezi, and that's what I did my DMP project on. And it was really cool because I got to teach Mel how to navigate it because it was her first time using it. But I think the podcast was the most fun because we both didn't know how to work it. And it was great because then it was we had to do something together that we both didn't know, and we had to navigate it together. And through that, we were able to learn about each other, and learn about the things that we like. We added a lot of cool effects, and we were talking about it and seeing how does that relate to us, and it was really cool. I think that was by far the best DMP project that we had to do.
Yeah. So Bernie and I are really similar in personality, which I could tell from day one. We're both really organized. We both have the same sense of humor. We're both really into languages, although Bernie's a Japanese speaker and my language of choice is Spanish. And we both really love incorporating art into our writing, drawing pictures or digital art. And we did a lot of this by just being out and about in the city, going to museums. We went to a Broadway show together, and we had many, many cups of coffee and chai lattes.
That's definitely, hanging out with Mel was definitely amazing experiences all throughout. And I think for me, what's very important, I am a minority here in America, and especially at my college. And I think it's very important that when you have a relationship with somebody, especially a mentor, you are able to have difficult conversations. And I think through difficult conversations and having differing opinions about things is really important because then you are able to grow and understand each other deeply. It's not enough to just know each other's interests, but it's also important to know each other's opinions on things because our opinion oftentimes shapes our writing and the choices that we make in our writing, and I think it's really important because then if one of us writes something and we don't understand where did that knowledge come from, it's important that we have those conversations. And I think oftentimes, especially over coffee and lattes and everything, that we have these conversations, especially I think our favorite place was the Brooklyn Public Library. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there were random times we would I would bring up a conversation and then we would gear towards that, and then we use that as a fuel to write certain pieces. And I think that was really one of my most memorable moments in the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now that we're no longer actively involved in the program, we're both alumni of the program. Bernie is still a really active part of my life and one of the most important people in my life. And I really truly think that I have two sisters by birth, and I have another half sister in Bernie, which is
sorry, since graduating from my high school and also GWN, Girls Right Now, our relationship has never like deteriorated in any sort of way, and I think that was for me a relieving part, because it kind of shows to me that like whatever relationships that you have in a program, it doesn't just stay in the program, it transfers outwards. And I think it's really important that happens, because when I came to Girls Right Now and I thought about my mentor, I thought about, okay, so how can I sustain the relationship that I built within the program, outside the program, especially when I'm going upstate, for example. And I think Mel was an amazing person, because I feel like I had that person that I not only knew throughout the program, but also was able to like just not necessarily utilize, because that's a really weird way to put it, but somebody to confine in, somebody that I can talk to, somebody I'll be like, hey, I am doing nothing on Saturday. Can you do something with me? And I think that was really important. But I think the biggest thing for me that I took with me to college was the feedback that Mel gave me throughout my writing. Through her feedback, I was able to get a lot of A+ papers. She don't know this, but I got a lot of my papers were due to the feedback that I would constantly think about through Mel's, like the feedback that Mel had given me. And also, too, my brother was writing an essay last night, and all I was thinking about was, what would Mel say? What would Mel say? And I would like tell the same thing to my brother through his writing, so he can improve the same way that Mel had helped me improve. And so, like, yeah, this program was very important, but our relationship was also important. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us, Girls Right Now.